Welcome everyone who's taken time out of your evening to come and participate in our first of what may be many Counselor Corner Lives. Just to give some background on this idea, this was something that originated out of the Town Council's Communications Committee, really an effort to engage more fully with the general populace about controversial issues or not controversial issues, try to bridge that proximity between the town council and the community that they serve. I think that COVID over the last few years has stymied what I think were some other efforts in this regard, particularly around budget season, to have some open conversation. But really the hope is that this is a conversational evening. Certainly if you want to make a statement or ask questions, we have not only the two counselors that volunteered for this assignment, but we have a number of other counselors in attendance who I think also are receptive to feedback and having a conversation. So this is a hybrid forum. So we're going to try to, if you'd like to ask a question or make a statement or something in that regard, raise your hand, you'll have the floor. We'll try to be as I think cognizant to everyone who would like to speak as we can, but we'd also like to bring some people in virtually as well. So I'll try to alternate those opportunities. Other than that, I'm going to sit back and handle the technology or attempt to. And I don't know if any counselor would like to make a opening statement.
Yeah, I can just say, thank you everybody for coming, both those here and online. Again, as Liam mentioned, this is kind of our first attempt at trying something different. We as a council all agree finding new opportunities to encourage engagement and participation is great. Our council meetings and public hearings are a little more formal, a little more structured. The chair has made some good decisions in terms of allowing us to respond during public comment, so it can be more interactive, but those are still forums where we have business to do, where we have to get through the agenda, so we can't really take the time and actually engage in conversation. And so we wanted to try and create a forum. We've done these in the past, I think, in previous councils, they called them roundtables, where they did one a quarter, I think. And so this is kind of our attempt at trying to bring those back and kind of learn about how to do them, especially in a hybrid environment, because those in the past were virtual. And I would consider this a pilot where we're just trying to see how we can organize and structure these to make them more effective and impactful. It's great to see the turnout. I think our goal was like we had at least 10 people, either both online and physically show up, but that would be good for this first one. So the fact that we have what looks to be probably like close to 30 or 40 folks is great. Some I did have to twist their arms to come. So thank you all for showing up. I think for this particular topic, as we were setting the agenda, we wanted to do something that we thought would really drive conversation so that we could actually hear from many sides of the community about any concerns or issues or even things that they support about where we are as it relates to growth. We know we did the survey, and in the survey it indicated significant concerns around growth. But what the survey doesn't really do a good job of is help us understand why and what are the things that are concerning. And so, or even the things that people are very supportive of and look forward to. And so we just want to hear more from the community today. What are your concerns? What are you excited about? What have we done as a council recently, or that you've read in the paper that you have some questions on that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to ask or dig a little bit deeper? And we can try as best as we can today to answer those. I would say Councilor Seither and I are the sponsors for this one, but all councilors are invited to participate. So we're not here today as a body. We're really here today as elected officials. So anything we say and share today is not really a reflection of the position of the council. It's really the position of each of us as individual elected officials. So hopefully from this conversation, though, we might identify some things that we may want to take back to the council, have on a future agenda for true council deliberation and discussion. So that'll be something we'll be listening for tonight if there's things like that we could probably bring forward. Councilor Seither, if there's anything you want to add.
I mean, this guy sitting next to this guy, going after this guy, it's always a tough act to follow. I came into tonight with no expectations, no agenda. I want to hear what people want to talk about, and I will answer your questions as candidly and on the spot as I possibly can. I literally don't have material. I mean, I don't even have materials with me. I could dig them out, I guess. So if I don't have, so if I don't have the problem, so if I don't have the answer to your question, you know, we can definitely make note of it and come back to it. But really, I hope to just, you know, engage with everybody for the next hour and hope that you get out of this what you're hoping, more than anything else.
I think we just ask if you, do you want to say something or have a question? And if you're comfortable, just sharing your name,
Yes, please.
just so that we can make sure we can align a face to the name, and then maybe how long you've lived in Scarborough, just to kind of give us some context about your background. So if you want to share or say anything, again, if you're comfortable, you know, sharing your name would be great.
Yeah.
You know, I'll try to be brief because we've got a lot of questions here. I think this is the best. Really, it's such a great opportunity because you go to those meetings and you can't really communicate. So I'm going to try to be quick.
Okay.
It's Nina McKee. And as we all know, schools, traffic, natural resources, affordable housing, etc., are all related to growth. So tonight, I want to highlight growth related to the Downs' second request for an exemption from the GMO requirement of building 43 units in 1 year. And the Downs is asking to build 430 units in 5 years, which doubles the requirement from 43 to 86 per year. The Downs developers say they need to build more residential units in order to make the proposed town center a success. 1,000 units are needed within a 5-mile walk to support the center. Also, more units may be needed in the future. As most of us know, the town center is a 90-acre project with residences, community space, a community center, a pool, daycare, senior space, and other amenities. A quote from the February 18th Leader says, "Without the exemption, it is impossible for developers to start a town center, finance the necessary infrastructure, and attract residents and retail shops. With an exemption, the Downs would be able to begin planning and developing the town center without having to wait years to secure the appropriate number of permits to proceed with the project." Developers said the success of the town center would rely on housing. If the GMO exemption is denied, developers said they would have to build on market demand and not build to help solve the state of Maine's housing crisis. End of quote. So my little thoughts are basically, who needs a town center? Some people really want it, some people don't. But it seems to me we have the town hall, we have the schools, we have blah, blah, blah. We have everything here. Okay, so I agree with Allison, who had a suggestion of having a citizens referendum like North Yarmouth did. Now, the second thing is the GMO is a clear, accepted document that needs to be followed. Otherwise, why do we have it? And the third thing is the Downs says that they cannot provide more detailed town center plans unless they know how many permits will be allowed. Well, why on earth would the council even consider an exemption without specific plans? So growth is inevitable, but it must be controlled. And the GMO exists to control growth. So why would the council consider even one exemption, let alone 2? The recent community survey resulted in strong concerns for controlling growth. I urge the council and planning board to listen to Scarborough citizens. And I urge the council to reject the Downs' second exemption request and adhere to the established growth management ordinance now and in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah. So maybe Councilor Scyther, you and I can kind of share some information about just kind of where things are and how we got to where we got to, just to add some color, especially for those of you who might not be familiar with some of the things that Nina went over. So maybe first starting with the GMO. So the GMO is our growth management ordinance, which is essentially our piece of ordinance that allows us to set the pace for growth in the town. So right now, I think it's 144 units per year is what we allow through our GMO, though we have made exceptions in our GMO. One of the exceptions we did make deliberately when we approved the GMO was to create a separate process for approval for exemption. So that was one of the things specifically as a council we decided to do. And I just trying to dig back, I think it really had to do with the fact that in the past we had a pool where if not all the permits were issued, they would go into a pool, which could then be allocated. And we saw that as a challenge with growth management. We were just kind of reserving the pool and then using those all at one time. So I think this was a thought at trying to limit that by making it go through this separate exemption process. So that was intentionally designed to allow developers, if they wanted to grow beyond what was permitted in the current ordinance, to come forward to the council and request an exemption. What we are requiring of them is that they have to justify public benefit in order to be considered for an exemption. So similar to some of the other ordinance we have, you may have, when a developer comes or anybody wants to come and do something different in our zoning, it would be called a contract zone amendment, where we would actually require them to go through a pretty rigorous process to try and justify why they want to change the zone and have to justify public benefit. I think we all recognize when we created that exemption, we probably didn't really think through the process very well. So a lot of what I think the public is seeing right now is not having a strong process in place where things are moving. And I think we're trying to go with the flow as best we can. And the last action that the council took up was to allow the town manager to actually, with this Downs exemption, work with a consultant that we've hired to see if there's a way to really kind of define that public benefit with the Downs to determine, so the council can then evaluate that to determine if we think the public benefit is there to justify the increase. So we haven't made a decision yet as a council to approve the exemption. What we've kind of authorized is continuing to work to see if we can justify that public benefit, which will come to the council at some point where we will make a decision and the public will be a part of that decision to decide if that's worth approving or not.
Just for clarification though, what's being, under consideration as the town center, it's not being treated as a contract center, correct? That's what I understood from the March 9th.
So
meeting.
it's what they're asking for specifically is within 90 acres, they would like an exemption to build housing. What we approved was, or what was approved at the council in terms of allowing the town manager to move forward was considering, I think, 430 units, which would be in addition to whatever they're already approved to do within the GMO. And really the public benefit that they've prescribed is the town center, which I think to Nina, to your point, that's a decision as a community we need to align on is a town center worth the exemption, is the perceived benefit of a town center worth the exemption. There's also discussion of potential land for a future school or community center that is part of the conversation. And then again, there were other things that were offered in the exemption, like giving some public land to the Scarborough Land Trust was another thing that they had brought forward. So there's a lot of things that the Downs is trying to offer in terms of public benefit so that we can really determine, is that public benefit worth the exception or the exemption that they're looking for in terms of growth permits?
Nick McGee, 8 River Woods. So I appreciate you doing this. This is a nice forum. I just wanted to touch on something though, as it relates to the downtown area. It keeps being brought up that it's either potentially a site for a school or it's a potential community center. To me, those are municipal services that regardless of whether or not there's a downtown or 1,800 more homes put in, those are still two items that this town keeps talking about and wants to bring forward. regardless of how many houses are built in there. So I'm not seeing that as quote unquote a public benefit in the sense that it sounds like we're already headed down that path, regardless of whether it's placed in the downs or not, whether we have a downtown or not, whether we have 1,200 new homes. None of that really matters. We're still talking about a community center separately and a possible new school separately to service what we have here now for a need. And so I think that idea of like, it's a carrot type of approach, like you get this benefit and I know, like, just sounds to me like it's telling us that we can give you what you already want and probably will have down the line. What's the extra benefit there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so there's so much nuance to all of this, right? And so one of the important things I think that is relevant to this conversation is the council has been clear that we want that land gifted to the town. And so for anybody who, you know, is familiar with Scarborough real estate, there are not a lot of places to put another municipal building, whether it's a community center or a new school. And so, you know, the Downs has a large developable area right now, and that land has value, and we would like to have that land. And so, you know, just as a, you know, from a public benefit, is offering an exemption, you know, worth it if we get a 15-acre parcel of land for a new school for free? Or for, you know, $1 lease like the library does, something like that.
Before we get to you, Allison, can you see, is there any other questions or comments from others yet? Sir?
Hi. My name is Carol Welker. I live on Chemical Mill Road in Scarborough. And been in Scarborough for 10 years now. And the GMO exemption is kind of a difficult one for me to digest. And this is my own personal feeling and while talking with some others. Scarborough is a very successful town. And we've done very, very well. And before the Downs came along. Downs is a business. We are not responsible for the Downs business. Downs project agreement was made with a given GMO in place. So why pursue an exemption? Last year's community survey showed that 2/3 of the people responding had real concerns with the impact of uncontrolled growth. So why have a survey? Answer that one question. Growth is inevitable, and it should be. We should want to grow, and nobody else in this room doesn't want Scarborough growth. But growth management is key. It's key. And it should be managed with, it should be done with managed objectives that represent the best of the taxpayer and the town. By pushing for an exemption to the GMO, it feels like the taxpayer is not on equal footing with the Downs business goals. And again, we're not responsible for the Downs business goals. You know, if this exemption is not passed, we'll be in just as good shape next year as we are this year. There's no real necessity for us to mess with the goals of managing our growth. Just isn't. And I've talked with Rocco in the past, and I know how excited he is about the project. And when he first started in 2018, we talked, and he needed us to vote on this because he had 7 people that were going to be coming into the industrial area. We needed that for our benefit. Wouldn't impact the schools. Months and months and months and months went by. Nothing happened in that arena. Okay, so now somebody mentioned the carrot. You know, we're bigger than that. Rocco was very successful. He has outmaneuvered us in the ability to negotiate. That's the truth, and you have to admit that. And God bless him, he's done his business he's done very well with his business, and rightly so. His job and his goal is to want the best for his business, and he should. But we as a community should be governing based on management, look at all the scenarios of what growth is gonna do to us, schools, infrastructure costs, because who's gonna pay for this? Okay, so Rocco's doing okay. Okay, so from day one, I thought it was very inappropriate to send back 40% of our revenue to a person who's trying to build his business. Not right, folks. It's just not right. And so I'm asking those that are here tonight and who are really genuinely concerned about our growth, to manage our growth. Because if we manage our growth, we'll manage our costs. We'll do less fighting at budget. Okay, so let's keep the ship on an even keel. Let Rocco run his business. Okay, we'll run ours. Ours is the town. So please respond to that request. We should have good growth management, and if we think that needs to be improved along the way, we make a suggestion to improve it.
Would you, anything you want to?
So with,
Sorry.
given with infrastructure costs and all the rest of it, in closing, I'm asking you not to add an exception to the chief. The other thing I like this forum. I think it's great. But we would have more interested parties here that were not at 5:30.
That's good feedback.
There are so many families out there. I talk to people at Linwood Heights. Most of the jobs in Scottsboro, 95 jobs, right?
Mhm.
So we should give these people an opportunity to go to a meeting, with their families and others, fathers trying to get their kids to and from school, dinner at night, it's just too much. So for us to take full advantage of this forum here, we should set a time when more people can get there. And I understand you have the opportunity of technology, but even that, the person has to sit down to take advantage of that.
That's a great suggestion. I know, one of the things we've talked about for budget is we might try and do budget roundtables again, or kind of maybe following a format like this where we can do that for budget. And I think we've already started to realize that one meeting on this topic at one time is probably not sufficient, to your point, and we probably could find different times where we could do it throughout the day, because this works for some folks. For some people, early in the morning might be better, so we can get creative in the future for how we want to do this. One thing to add that I think that you said, Carol, just to share, another piece of information when it comes to cost and management, which again is kind of another reason why this exemption could benefit Scarborough potentially if it does move forward, really does kind of go back to finances where, the cost to serve in a dense multi-unit development, kind of like the Downs is proposing, does tend to have a much lower cost to serve, which does bring additional, finances to the town, which could then be used to offset, taxes to other taxpayers by using those incremental profits potentially that we would get because the cost to serve is lower. So not that that's a decision point in and of itself to kind of make the decision on this, but there is a little bit of a relationship between what the Downs is proposing, how it could potentially create, additional financial benefit to the town that would actually have a positive impact. But also to your point, the thing that probably hasn't been fully understood is beyond just this project or this project in and of itself, what are the other costs associated with it that are invisible or not fully understood around impact to schools? And Finance Committee with former Councilor Paul Johnson, we talked a lot about like marginal costs of development and like at what point do we hit kind of the tipping point where we need to do some significant investment that really does go immediately to the town and the taxpayer, because those are things that we have to do. And not that I think we're there just yet, but I think the school is probably one really good situation that I think, Nina, you brought up, and I don't think you brought it up, Carol, but like, the schools are at a point right now where they're already at capacity, and we need new facilities, and so we do have to keep that in mind. Probably not something that needs to happen tomorrow, but like in the next 5 to 10 years, we're gonna be in a situation where the schools are gonna have to get, the facilities are gonna have to get addressed, and both Councilor Seifer and I serve on the school building committee that's recently just kicked off. They're looking for interested citizens to participate on that committee to support communications, planning, those types of things. So if people here are interested to kind of get involved with that, you know, I think there's information that'll be coming out, but again, like that's an important thing we need to consider as we manage growth is, does the schools have an adequate absorption plan to help ensure that we have the facilities to deliver the right education? Paul, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I forget which part I have my hand up for, but I'm Paul Beaver, and I'm Councilor Anderson's favorite neighbor on Owens Way. So to Carol's point, about the Downs, of course, being a business, and they're trying to do right by their business, and I think that I don't have enough information yet to be, take a position on this whole exemption thing. I don't know nearly enough about it at this point to say one way or the other, but I will point out that, they have already seemed to have made business decisions that are a little bit counter to what they were promoting. For example, the Innovation District, I planned on putting my business in there, wanted to, was waiting for it. They were kind of silent for a while, and then all of a sudden even though they had been promoting that this was going to be for local Scarborough small businesses, they sold the remaining half of their lots to, I think, IDEX all at once, and that stopped businesses like mine from being able to be in there. So even though they were talking a lot about what that district was supposed to be, they took an opportunity to sell it all off in one fell swoop for their business, and so we have to be cognizant of exactly that. That ultimately they'll make the best decision for their business, just as Carol mentioned.
We're gonna go online, and then we'll go to you next, man. So for those online, we're gonna switch gears real quick and see if we can pull someone in from online to share some feedback.
So Mark, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
Hi there, I think I'm unmuted. Mark Turfloth, been in Scarborough for 13 years, and it's a great town. So there's lots of good things, but the concerns, 3 in particular. Taxes. Last year, there was a massive subsidy to the town budget. 2/3 of the budget, as I understand in round numbers, goes towards schooling related. So also, I read some years ago, I can't quote, that every child costs an average of something in the range of $13,000 to put through school per year on average. I think it's near, if it's not. Simple arithmetic for those who are going to be moving into the community. Many are with children, not just one child, but many children. Doing the arithmetic, the owner of the master spreadsheet, wherever that person may be in town, I'd love to know how they're doing a calculation on break even and how this is going to pay for itself, because that would imply that taxes and revenue per household would have to be something near that kind of number, which it's not. The hole was plugged last year with a massive federal subsidy. That was last year. Every year there's an argument about growth and shortfalls. How are we doomed for anything other than massive tax increases in the future, with more and more people coming, with more and more children, especially where we're at a stage where we're in a step function where we're about to have a requirement for whole new facilities. So that's one. Two, the survey was done of the community. They responded. They responded with priorities and the impression. So this is an impression. I'm not stating as fact, but the impression, the perception is that of those key points that those who responded to the survey, of the key points relate to Scarborough's beauty, nature, beaches, etc., along those lines. With every further development and with every further permit, I'm wondering how many more lanes are going to have to be built to accommodate the roads to the beaches, to the perimeters and beyond of Scarborough without making what now takes 15 minutes at 5 o'clock to get off of Black Point Road up on the corners there by Walgreens, just as an example. And I suppose, well, I'll leave it at that. Those are, you know, two of my primary concerns.
So maybe just to mark some pieces of information that you may be interested in. So at least as it relates to access to natural resources and things like that, we are in process of doing a parks and facilities master plan to really kind of understand all of our infrastructure and access needs to all of our parks and trails and things across Scarborough. So I think that's going to be a really important output that we'll want to understand to decide how are we effectively able to ensure that people can continue to get the access and enjoy those amenities that Scarborough has to offer. So hopefully that will help shine some light on where we need to make some investments. And again, that should be something we consider as we think about growth. The other piece, just as you were talking about traffic and getting around, another thing that's this year in the budget that we just saw yesterday, so we haven't had time to really talk about it, is we're going to be doing another townwide transportation study. So the last one we did was in 2005, and it was meant to go through, I think, 2025. And I don't think it entertained things like the Downs or the growth that we've seen since 2005. And so it's time to kind of refresh that and really understand what are the different traffic improvements we want to make to support, you know, the growth that's going to be happening, or to manage the growth that's already happened. And then I think the other piece is, and this has come up a few times because I know a lot of people, when they talk about growth, have mentioned concerns about green space and reduction of our natural resources, which I know is critical. So as part of our comprehensive plan, which is really our guide for zoning and development, we purposely identified Oak Hill, Dunstan, and the Downs as our high growth areas where we encourage high density development. So you will see more, you know, clear cutting of trees and things like that in those areas. And that was done by design to protect the rest of Scarborough and the rest of the green space from getting developed and overdeveloped. And so while I know there's a concern about that, you know, that was deliberate to try and protect the natural resources everywhere else. Doesn't mean that it's still not a concern that, you know, to support the development and support the growth that, you know, we're seeing those trees and nature, you know, getting, you know, having to have less of that, especially in the areas that we see often, because I'm sure most of us drive through those areas and see it. So it's hard to know, like, if you don't go out to North Scarborough or West Scarborough very often, you know, you're not seeing the same pace of growth. And again, that was purposeful. But again, that's kind of where we are. That doesn't mean though that we just allow for a faster pace of growth in those areas, which again is where the GMO comes in to help manage the pace of growth. So those are just some things you might be interested in following up on. Councilor Scyther, or anything?
So if I was going to add anything to this discussion, and this is really just trying to see things, you know, from a variety of different perspectives. One of the things that I think needs to be part of the conversation is there's growth that we can control, and then there's growth in surrounding communities that we can't control, but that we should plan for. And so part of what you were touching on just now about, you know, our own road improvements and things like that, some of that is going to be in response to growth that isn't happening in Scarborough. We can try as we may, but beautiful beaches are going to draw people from outside our community, no matter what we do. And so part of the problem that I think is getting labeled as growth isn't necessarily always within our control to say no to that kind of growth. We want to attract, we've all said we love Scarborough. Scarborough is a beautiful place. We can't close the gates and say, well, we have this beautiful place and you can't come here. But we do need to plan and accommodate to make sure that the residents are happy and that we maintain all of the services that we all enjoy. But, sometimes growth in Scarborough isn't the actual problem. It's the fact that surrounding communities are putting some pressure on us from the outside too. And so that's kind of just another piece of this conversation. It's one thing to say growth is responsible for crowding at the beaches, but we could not build another home in Scarborough and our beaches are not going to become less crowded. They're not going to become less popular in the summertime. And so how do we plan for that and be mindful of that and not always associate that with growth that's happening maybe within town? And then the other thing that I wanted to touch on really, really quickly is the GMO changed quite a bit from what it was to this newest version. And one of the things that changed that resonates with me as a new counselor, all of this happened before I was on the council, is that we used to allow what was called fractionalization. And so fractionalization allowed for builders to split permits and build more units off from a single permit. And the new GMO eliminated that ability to do that. And so when we talk about number of units now, the old GMO allowed for a lot higher number of units to be built per permit. And so when we changed the GMO, some of the developers, the Downs of course included, but other developers as well, now we've kind of changed the language and changed the process for them. And what they maybe had planned now seems outrageous within the confines of the new GMO. But when they were planning based on the old GMO, they were able to accommodate more units and it kind of had a maybe a softer impact because the number of permits that they were requesting seemed lower, even though the number of units, is exactly the same as what they had planned now. Mm-hmm. And so, it's so much, like there's so many different pieces to all of this that you have to understand in order to have a productive conversation, which obviously I think that this is a productive conversation. And I want to know, like, as a counselor, like, how do we get that information to people? Like, what is it that people feel like they don't know or that they don't have from the council perspective in order to ask better questions or, feel more informed? Or how can we better reach people on some of these really complicated topics? Yeah.
I was wondering, I did some research about rural areas managing growth, and sometimes they'll do a year moratorium on growth and just stop it so everyone can get their heads about them. I'm not suggesting that. I still don't know where I stand. I support him. One of the things I wanted to say is for these Council Corner Lives, sort of like the British Parliament, I think it'd be nice for you guys to hear like an aye like on these letters, because
that's a good idea.
yeah, because
like
that just seems like it's him, but aye you sir.
Sure.
Aye you.
So
I like it.
from now on, aye.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like it.
Or waving your hands online, whatever you want to do there.
But if I'm trapped in an elevator with one of you and I don't know your vision for what you want Scarborough to be, there's a saying, character begets character, and this was a rural place and had beautiful houses, and now I see, frankly, apartment complexes that I think are ugly and that I'm not proud of.
Aye. And so that it feels like the Downs is just more of that, and it's moving the character of the town into this place. Like, come to Scarborough where we have sprawling apartment complexes. It's a wonderful place, but there's some cool beaches. So I think a lot of people feel that way. It's embarrassing, some of these things, and
I moved here 3 years ago. I'm catching up. I have a lot of regret about, and I know other people do, 5 years ago, all these, the credit enhancement agreements, these things, like, I use the metaphor of like, we're the pretty girl at the bar. Why are we buying other people drinks? You know what I mean? But those seems like mistakes in the past, and now we're paying for them in a way. There's this snowball effect. So I don't envy your the complexity of the issue, but what I would love from the counselors is an elevator pitch of your vision or a unified vision. I know they have that 110-page document, but like it's still confusing. What do you guys want Scarborough to be? Do you want it to be an apartment complex place? I mean, that's really it. I don't know what you want.
Sure, I'll put my neck out.
Go ahead.
All right.
Identify himself. I know he's
Sorry,
pretty
my
good.
name's David Walton. I live on Masker Lane, and I've been living here for three wonderful years.
Thanks.
Grew up coming here my whole life, though.
I think that this is a great question. I don't know if I can answer it and do it justice, but what do I want for Scarborough? Okay, so I grew up in Scarborough. My parents live on Pleasant Hill Road. My in-laws live on Maple Avenue. My husband grew up in Scarborough. We went to high school together. We went away for a while. We came back. We had 4 kids. We live in a beautiful house out off from Broadturn, trees, dirt road, the whole lovely, beautiful picture. Couldn't ask for more, frankly. We have a great school district. I love that for my children. What I want for Scarborough is for Scarborough to continue to be a place where they can come back and live. My worst nightmare is that they will have gone through Scarborough's successful school district and will not be able to come back to Maine or to Scarborough specifically, because we don't have any place for young people starting out to live, because we don't have any place for them to work and be successful or use a college degree. And so how do we build a town that works for people who live here now, for people like my parents who have lived here, who have no interest in selling? They're not interested in how much their house is worth today, tomorrow, or the day after that. They're not going anywhere. So how do we make Scarborough work for people who want to be here for many generations and offer a little bit to everybody? So we have to have some white picket fences and some houses with some land, if that's what people want. We also have to have maybe some higher density apartment units for young people or workforce housing. We have to have businesses that are dynamic and diverse and attract people. If I had $100 to go spend in Scarborough, this was going to be my icebreaker question if I had to run the show, but thankfully John does a really good job. I asked my husband jokingly, if you had $100 to go spend in Scarborough, and I said, here you go. You have from 8 in the morning until 8 o'clock tonight. Go spend your $100. What would you do? We both agreed we would take the kids to Pat's, and then we would hit Berry Corner, and then we would go down to the beach. And that is how my family would spend there's 6 of us, so $100 doesn't go far, but that's how we would spend our day in Scarborough. And so when I think about Scarborough, I think about how do we meet the needs of different generations at different points in their lives and make sure that we maintain that there's something there for everyone.
So I share a lot of similar thoughts with Councilor Seither, but slightly different background and story. So I'm not originally from Scarborough. I'm originally from Northern Virginia, where I grew up in a community about an hour outside of DC. And I remember when that community was mostly farms, mostly doing things. And then over time, the sprawl of the DC area got its way there. When I go back to that town, it's unrecognizable. There are, strip malls everywhere, houses popping up left and right, and it's not what I remember growing up, and that makes me a little sad when I think about it, because I remember running around on the farm near us, and now it's this big development with a bunch of houses. And so for those who have been in Scarborough for a long time and are seeing that, I totally get the concern and the nostalgia of the past, because it was bad and traffic was terrible. That was partly why we left the DC area, was because traffic was horrendous. It took me an hour and a half to get to work. one way and then an hour and a half back, so I didn't have enough time with my family. And, we moved to Scarborough specifically because we felt like it was a town friendly to people who really wanted to have a good quality of life. And I think trying the best we can to preserve that quality of life is super important. Making sure that it's open and welcoming to people of all different backgrounds socioeconomically, so that people can afford to live here is important. Right now, because of our housing situation, it's not affordable for many people. There was somebody I talked to who is a teacher who's paying $1,700 a month to rent an apartment, which is just crazy to think that's how much it costs to have an apartment in Scarborough. So we do need to do something about that in the community. Part of that could be adding more supply to the community, right? Adding more supply to housing will naturally drive the pricing down. And so that's a strategy to try and address that. But for me, like, again, if everything is, this is just my perspective, if everything froze in Scarborough today, I'd be happy. Like, I don't need things to change. I'm comfortable going to Portland, going to
It's an aye, by the way.
going to Portland to go to restaurants, or going to South Portland to go to their pool. Like, I'm okay with that, but I get there are people in the community who want something closer, who want that more stronger community feel. And so, I think that's okay too if people want that. I think what we have to do and figure out is that we are a diverse community. We have different opinions, priorities, and needs. And I think that's the challenge of us, is to figure out how do we consider all of those to come up with the right solution that will make the most people happy. Because, and by most, I mean like probably 51%, because every time, there's something before us, we know that there will be people who won't like the answer. So, it's a challenge, and that's why, it's a challenge we accepted when we got elected to try and figure out. But again, I think we need help from the community to help make some decisions like this Downs exemption. I think hearing today people's perspective is helpful to know where does that register for you in terms of something you would support or not support. Because again, what we're really talking about is many factors that could benefit the public, but then there are also some consequences, and we need to kind of figure out as a council, as it comes before us later, like, are the consequences and the costs worth the potential benefits that we might get as a community? And I think it's very challenging. So hopefully we answered your question, David.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I think I'd like to hear kind of.
Actually, can we get those two counselors to do it too?
If you guys would like to. Yeah.
Sure. I like Scarborough how it is. And there's some things that we have discretion over, and some things that are kind of mandated upon us. And from my perspective, I'm trying to exercise the discretionary pieces to protect as much of Scarborough as it exists today as we can, while allowing for some of the, there's some deficiencies too, where, and a lot of us, if you went to school in Scarborough, there's not a place for you until you turn 30, maybe upper 20s now, because you need to have established yourself a little bit. I think a good example of breaking the mold.
Thank you, sir.
Which is encouraging to me. That excites me. The fact that we have a place for almost everybody now that wants to be in Scarborough is exciting. Growth. Don't sell your land. Keep it. Tell your neighbors, your friends, stop selling, and you're going to control growth. Beyond that, we have some mechanisms or tools that we can use, and some that we can't. This council took a club to growth last year. You're going to see it in a couple of years because these things happen over time. This year, I think we've issued 55 permits, something around that. We've said no to 92 with a contract zone request that came forward. We've built 300 to 500 over the past 4 or 5 years a year. The way the state mandates how we regulate growth is our 10-year average, right? So we got cute. We said, well, we didn't permit 300 to 400 units a year. We only gave permits. So we got fancy with how we count things, and the fact that we're talking about any deviation from the 144 that comes up in itself is going to be slowing down growth. And we're taking our time when we do evaluate these things. The one before us now, it's been here since October. I don't know when it's going to be done. Could take us 5 years to work through that. So that's it. I think Scarborough's a fantastic place. There's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of different pockets there. And I'm just trying to protect as much of it as I can. I'm happy here. The schools are awesome.
Yeah, they are.
Teachers are awesome.
Yeah, it's a tough act to follow. I cannot do a 5-minute elevator speech, I'll say that. But I-
Two.
2 minutes. But I'd say a couple of things. One is, it's true about the GMO, you know, we made an effort to use that as the main limit valve on growth, and we haven't figured out the controls yet, okay? It's safe to say. I spent a lot of time and a lot of hot air saying that it was gonna help us flatten the curve. And if I had to, you know, say, how did I do on that the first year? Well, there's no way that it's lived up to my claim. So if I had to vote on that again, I don't think I'd vote the same way. So
Interesting.
part of it is, you know, life happens when you're busy making plans. So we have a comprehensive plan. It's quite detailed. It lays out this concept of high growth areas, protecting our natural beauty and preserves and those things. Those are things that will guide us, but it does turn on the council and the public to tell us what they want, and for the council, the best we can do to try to interpret that and implement that. I would like to get, simply stated, I'd like to get to the point where I feel as though instead of the byline on the website saying, one of the fastest growing towns in the state, I'd rather say, this is a town that's committed to managing growth, okay? Right now, growth is managing us, okay? And we need to get back. Thank you, thank you. And there's a way for us to do that. And it's like this, having a dialogue about these things. It's not jumping ahead and doing things that we think are in the best interest of the town without really having conversations about it. So, you know, hats off to John and to April for taking this on. And one final thing I'd say, you know, there's big stuff we want to accomplish. We want, you know, there's a need for improvements to the schools. I'll say that. We've institutionalized trailers of our manufactured
have.
modular structures, okay, for our schools. There's no excuse for a town like that, for a town like
30.
Scarborough to have that. That's just not acceptable.
Mm-mm.
Now, a
That's
list of things,
embarrassing.
you know, the list of things that are queuing up, downtown, a community center / pool, and I always forget the third one.
Library.
Thank you. That I didn't think was going to be on the ballot, but apparently it is going to be on the ballot in the fall. I don't know how we decided that or how that was decided.
Counselor
We can't-
Hamel.
We can't do it all. We
Finance chair
we
vetoes
cannot
that.
do it
Strike
all.
that last comment.
So we need to make choices. For me, and I'm an old guy that, you know, my wife and I had 4 kids that went all the way through school, and we wrote the same letters that parents of kids in school write today. We wrote those letters. We saved them. That's the number one. That's a number one priority. If you have to step back and say, for me, that's the number one priority. So that's important to hear what you have to say, but that's my not 5-minute elevator speech. Thank you.
We had a hand up over here.
Oh, yes, I'm Cindy Ferrin, I live on Blackwood Road. And I've seen a lot of change. I moved here 18 years ago from a town in Connecticut, New Canaan. And that town also had this, it was, hours from New York, a lot of pressure for growth. But it stuck to its growth limits, its plan. It did not, as far as I know, I wasn't on the council, there weren't all these exceptions going on. And people have commented, other towns around us, Connecticut towns, did see a sprawl, but New Haven kept the main center, the main street, very much the same. There was change in stores and all that stuff, but they did not let it sprawl out. We had to have our apartment buildings, but they weren't taking over. They just were done. I wasn't on the council. All I can say is the growth pressure was huge, but they stuck to what they thought was right. They did not make exceptions. And isn't this the second exception we did to the Downs? What was the first one?
This is the first one.
If I might,
Yeah.
and I'm Allison Bristol, I live on Bayview Avenue. When the GMO was redone, the Downs was given 104 exemptions. that expired at the end of 2021. And that was kind of the
Mhm,
debacle
got it.
with all of the growth permits being
Mhm.
issued. And so now we're looking at another 430. And correct me if I'm wrong, John, with the, fractional use. Are one-bedroom apartments also exempt, that they're not counted?
So it's one.
Everything's counted as a
Right, but
There's a
So
built-in
outside,
exception.
outside of
built-in
the,
exception
yeah.
for one-bedroom apartments.
outside of the CPD zone for apartments under like 550 square feet that are one bedroom. I think it's up to 70.
So that's not factored into the number of
Yeah.
units, that's a built-in exemption, really.
Right.
Right,
Exactly.
so,
Up to-
so when
up to
you're
70.
talking about
Yeah.
apartment buildings, and you can build one-bedroom apartments,
Mhm.
willy-nilly, because they're not part of the growth management. Do I have that right? No.
So only up, so
Okay.
it's up to 70 units over the next 3 years from when the ordinance was enacted. We've made an exemption to allow for that many, one bedroom under certain square footage that could be exempted. I don't think in our current numbers, because we track this online, I don't think there are any exemptions in that bucket that have qualified, so we haven't seen any actual permits being issued, I think, for any exemptions in that area, but that could mean next year, there could be 70, of those types of dwelling units outside of the the CPD zone, which is where the Downs is, where we could see those get used. But we did, when we were working on the GMO, the real catalyst that made us really realize we needed to work on it quickly, or really take it up and run with it, was when there was a run from the bank, essentially, with the permits, where all permits were requested in January.
Right.
And so
Right.
I think we had realized that the current GMO wasn't working and we needed to figure out a way. And so as we were evaluating it, there were some situations where there were people who wanted to just build a single family home on a lot that couldn't, because the developers or the big developers or some of their other bigger projects had already taken out all of the permits. And so I think that's why we were trying to figure out how do we structure this first year. And at the time, I think the Downs had a few in the queue. Again, they probably at the time wanted more than the 100. And I think the council collectively, when we supported the GMO, said, let's at least give them these initial 100.
But it kind of begs the question, then what's in store in 2023?
Yeah.
And 2024.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth.
And I would say, like, the whole notion of this exemption and the need, I would say the Downs has consistently, if you watch the meetings that took place many years ago when the TIF started, they did identify the GMO as a potential challenge for them to deliver the Downs. So that was something that they had come forward that they thought was an issue. So I just want to throw that out there, because I know there is people who say, well, we have the GMO. They got the deal with the GMO, they knew what they were getting. And I think even though it wasn't an official, agreement, like we never really, I think at the time they were under the impression that that would be something the council would work with them on. And so I think we tried to carry that forward a little bit as we kind of worked on this exemption. So there's a little bit of history there. Do you want to go online?
Yeah, can we take one from, and then I think I want to start talking Mark, he had a follow-up. Marvin, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
Hi, Marvin Gates, 423 Black Point Road. Great forum. Thank you, John. Thank you, Councilor Seither. Councilor Seither, I'm going to say that you are a tough act to follow too. I spent the last little bit of time revisiting the meetings I've had the pleasure of attending and listening to online. And Councilor Seither, you said something that I couldn't agree with more. It'll take me 36 seconds to read. This is from the March 2nd meeting. And forgive me, but I've transcribed it as accurately as I know how. Here goes. how do we balance and even begin to project the impact? And then again, I'm all for having more children in the district. I think that's wonderful, but we need to be able to plan for it. And so this is certainly not like, oh, we've got to stop this. All these young kids coming to the district. But my primary charge, I think, is to plan for that. And so I'm having a hard time even wrapping my head around where we would begin to be able to assess what the actual impact of this is going to be with enough time for the town to make sure that we have our infrastructure in place. And once you finish that, of course, the council was absolutely silent and you had to say a comment, not a question. And Jeff Levine was making his presentation then. I suppose, contrary to you, Councilor Seither, I did come in with expectations and an agenda. I don't know exactly what it is, but I very much appreciate this idea of trying to get your head around how you can control what has already started down the road. And I would very respectfully suggest maybe not what Mr. Walton referred to, which was a year moratorium or something like that, but a slight tap on the brakes. And if this makes some sense, I would say what I'd love to hear from the council to developers is the word no. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Next time you can leave out my awkward and lies.
So I think we saw,
Can we actually just go back to Mark?
yeah,
Okay.
so we're gonna go back to Mark online and then we'll work our way around this room.
Mark, you can speak again. I apologize.
Thanks. It's exactly, Marvin kind of followed on exactly with that comment to my first question, which I don't think I heard any address to, and that was merely the question about the cost and the eventual, call it break even, if you will, even though that's not a typical calculation done maybe at this level, of bringing all these kids into town where the cost of educating them is X, and I guessed it was around $13,000, whereas we know that 2/3 of the, you heard the question, I don't want to repeat the whole thing, the bottom line, where's this money going to come from? When, for example, last year, which was a pretty good year for the town, had this huge subsidy to plug a shortfall. This year, there may or may not be another subsidy. And then at the same time, considering that we're at $100 million plus on total debt and bonds for the town, which as I understand is potentially or is the most indebted town in, I don't know if it is in Maine. Anyways, the numbers are huge. So there's an overall fiscal concern here that starts with exactly Marvin's comment. And then I suppose it goes from there.
Yeah, so one way to approach what you're asking is to discuss how we grow in a way that doesn't impact or add students to our schools. And quite frankly, that's not going to happen. We allow for a certain number of growth permits. And if we're being realistic and honest here, if the Downs chooses to, they can put in cul-de-sac after cul-de-sac after cul-de-sac of single-family homes. The cost to serve those single-family homes is high, and the potential number of students in those homes or children in those homes is significantly higher than the projections for multifamily units. I have been a vocal skeptic of the projections for how many children get sent to schools just in general from multifamily units. I think it's higher than what some of the projections sometimes indicate. But we have to acknowledge that building single family homes only adds to the strain. And so if we're going to talk about growth and we're going to talk about smart growth, what we don't want to do is put ourselves in a position where we're only building single family homes. Frankly, that's kind of how we got here. And so in order to even out the tax base, we have to have a plan that isn't just single family homes.
Yeah. And I think, again, that goes back, like you said, the cost to serve for multifamily units are high dense units. Again, as part of our growth strategy, where we're encouraging that type of growth with in mind that hopefully it does spread the impact across the tax base so that you feel it less than if we were to do single family. So I think that, and that's the tough part is that, but there's still again, what I talked about earlier about the marginal costs of growth where we get to a point where infrastructure, schools and things like that do need something that while you might have a relatively lower cost to serve for a specific dwelling unit, over time, there are going to be needs within the community based on the increase in the population that's going to impact the town that we will have to invest in. And I think we're at a point right now where I think somebody had said, maybe slow down or put the brakes on. I think, and as Councilor Snyder was quoted, like making sure we have a good plan in place that helps us to make sure we're considering all these factors and making the best decisions as we can, I think is kind of where we're at this point. And again, I think with the downs, as Councilor Pucci said, it could take a long time before we are comfortable even moving that forward. So we're giving it the due diligence it deserves because we created this process for them to apply. We're evaluating it. We've allowed the town manager to kind of do more work on it. That doesn't mean that at the end of the day, it's something that's going to move forward until we've had the opportunity to really dig in and ask those questions.
Can I just make one footnote about that? This threat of, well, if you don't give us what we want, then we're going to build all these single family homes. I don't buy that. Okay?
Right.
Demographics and the trends don't even show that. So let's exercise that demon once and for all and stop having a partner threaten us with that.
Well, I mean, and again, for me personally, like if it was a bunch of single family homes, just personally, I'm not sure if that's a bad thing. I think there would be financial impact, but I think that's kind of the potentially, like, whether it's true or not, if that was the outcome that happened, is that okay for the community? I think that would be kind of.
When did children become a dirty word in this town?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
holy crap, single family homes and picket fences and children riding their bikes up and down the streets. Why is that terrifying to us? Like, I think that's beautiful.
So can we,
So-
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in
No,
there,
it's
but-
fine. I just want to make sure we can get around the room because there were some other hands that were raised.
There are 27 or so people here, and I would really like, time's going, I would like to hear, from some more people about what we're thinking.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
So starting with you, sir.
Yeah, my name is Tim Fahey, live on Bird's Nest Lane in Scarborough. I'm just curious about a couple of things. One, didn't we give a sizable tax break to the folks who were buying the downs in the first place? And now we're somehow held hostage to the fact that they're gathering up all the permits. And I'm not sure if this is true or not, but to your point, they can go willy-nilly and do what they want. Why do we allow this to even happen? And why don't we just, as a group, consider the fact that draw a map around the downs and not have I think you said it was a CMP zone where they can play nicely with us and adhere to the rules, but outside of that zone, within the 460 whatever acres, they can do what the heck they want. I think that's unfair because we've given them a tax break to do their business and suddenly they can kind of do what they want. It's counterproductive and it's causing strain or possible strain to the town and the infrastructure, as you said. Another thing I would like to suggest is it would be really good for optics if the council could agree, perhaps during the survey being conducted in the upcoming time from 2005 updated, add to the survey a priorities list where a ranked order of what we're trying to do as a town, like, hey, we're going to we want to get the schools and the roads taken care of. So in order to do that, logically, we can do this type of growth, like one for the other. If it's clear from the get-go what we are all interested in doing, ranked priority, it breaks up this very complex issue to a simple one. Whereas you want to get this, we do this. And this kind of growth issue will be much more in focus, I think, if the growth is allowed for a specific reason. And without that, I think we're just trying to assuage different priorities and different groups of people and that kind of thing. One last point, you mentioned trying to keep the people happy. I would like to have the people in Scarborough who would love to sit in traffic, not be satisfied. I just came back from Boston this morning, today, and wow, I grew up in Boston, been coming to Scarborough since I was a kid. And man, what a tragedy that place is. It's overgrowth. It is unbelievable. The quality of life in Boston is absolutely in the toilet. And it'd be great if we could keep that traffic block from crossing the bridge to the state.
Aye,
Thanks, Tim. All right, there was another hand raised. So we're trying to work our way around. So Sue?
I'm Sue Hamill. I live on Bay Street, High Point, and I frequently speak at these meetings, so I feel like we shouldn't even be here. I mean, the town has spoken. In the survey, we said we are concerned about growth. We don't want more growth. And we've had almost 1,600 units built in the last 5 years, ending December of 21. And that's from the planning department, 1,600 new units in town. And so if we have a GMO and we have people routinely asking for exemptions from it, why, and we always say yes, except the one time we said no was when the Roundwood, extended stay was trying to convert to apartments. That's the 92 units that John referred to. The only time that I can ever remember that the town said no. And I mean, have we ever said no before to anyone? Not that I remember. We've also gone from a town that was probably 10 to 12% apartments. The figure that I see right now is 22% apartments. And the projection is that we'll quickly be at 27% apartments. So that's really changing a lot about this town. The TMP, that's $13 to $15 million, the traffic management improvements. Basically on Route 1, that's going to involve, it comes down to smart lights, not new lanes, not improving intersections, smart lights. So, I mean, you can only do so much. Like, there's no more space on those roads. And we know that we've got two other big projects potentially coming to ask. Enterprise Business Park, there's supposed to be a 300 unit apartment complex going in there. So we'll be looking at that. And then we have the one that's on the corner of Muzzy Road and Gorham Road, which is 11 buildings with, I don't know how many units each building.
It's 120, I think is what.
120 units. So we know that these are going to keep coming. And it's hard to say no, but you got to learn how to do it.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to share too, especially for folks who have to leave early, which I think we're committed to say. I know it said this goes until 6:30, but we'll be here as long as everybody wants to be.
Stay.
Yeah. Or April will be here as long as everybody. There is a piece of legislation at the state level that I don't know if everybody's fully aware of. It's called LD 2003.
Yeah.
It's actually really rushing quickly through the state legislature. I don't know when it's planning to go to vote, but it is a piece of legislation that essentially will create some situations for Scarborough where it will allow for up to 3 units on any single family lot already in Scarborough. So I know there's a lot of people here today who's expressed concerns about growth. I would just encourage you, kind of like what Councilor Scyther said, some things are outside of our control. If the state passes this legislation, there are things that, again, we won't be able to manage because essentially their laws will overrule our ordinances where any single family lot will be able to have up to 3 units on it. So, even in zones that are zoned for just single family homes. So I just want to share that as another piece of information.
Quick question on that. Have any of the councilors urged our state reps to vote against this?
So I don't want to speak for, but I know Counselor Cucci has made testimony. Counselor Katerina sits on the MMA Legislative Committee that has consistently said that they're not supportive of it. So I think there has been direct council participation. I reached out to Sophia Warren, who is actually on the committee, I think, one of our representatives for one of the districts in Scarborough, to share concerns about the piece of legislation. So we've done our part, but again, it's, you know, we need people from the public also to get involved.
This is a particularly good time for you to reach out to your elected representatives and discuss stuff, because they're all running for reelection in November, and the primaries start in June. So they're actually responding to voicemails and emails.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to share that because I think it's another
I think
important
that's
thing to just make sure people are aware
Really
of.
good
So
piece of information.
continuing around, was there someone else over here who had their hand raised? Miss?
My husband and I moved here 3 years ago, and chose to retire here. And I've been a teacher, have been for 45 years. And one of the things that teachers have realized over the course of those 45 years is how important nature is to children, and to all of us, old people. Books have been written. One of the ones that impressed me the most was one called The Last Child in the Woods, and it was how to prevent nature deficit disorder, as kids are getting more and more screens and not being out in nature. And when we moved here, I was just so taken by the marsh and the Eastern Trail and how great this was for kids. And so anything you can do, pull back on population growth so that our trails and our marshes are protected. I think the environment is really, traffic is just awful for the environment. And birds and nature is so important for our kids, and they need to be out there. And you see more and more young families out with their kids on the trails and on the beaches now than 15 years ago, because they too are realizing that as they're watching the kids on their screens. And so I just think protect what is so beautiful of Scarborough and what it gives to the families of Scarborough.
Thank you. Harold, did you have, or sorry, Miss, did you want to say something?
My name is Elisa McPhee. I've lived here for 8 years. I am very concerned about the amount of growth that's happened in the last 8 years. I live on Pine Point Road. I moved here in 2014, and there was a nice lot behind my house. I didn't know that something was planned, and a 36-unit senior living apartment complex got shoehorned in there. And, you know, it's just, it's shocking to me. I drove into the Downs a few months ago, and I was shocked and dismayed at what I saw. It's ugly. And they want more, you know, it's just, I'm just dismayed. My taxes have gone up 29% in the last 8 years.
Aye.
I know part of that was the revaluation, but some of it wasn't. And it's driving people like me out of town. I mean, we're sort of sitting around thinking, stay. We have a senior in high school, and we have a junior in high school. And it's like, do we stay or do we leave? And I'm just sort of dismayed at the amount of growth. I did write to the town council, and Councilor Anderson was the only one who responded to me. I just feel like we're not being heard, you know, between the surveys and, you know, I'm glad that this forum is here. I hope that maybe we pump the brakes a lot.
Thank you. Harold, did you want to?
So I just want to say that I've been coming to the meetings for 10 years now, 10 years. And I feel like this is the first time a taxpayer has had an opportunity to engage with the select people without some type of an agenda already set. And this is really good news. And the weakness that we have is the taxpayers' word has not been heard. Going back to the referendum vote where we had a petition for that back in 2018, it was ignored. So I love this forum. It gives us an opportunity to talk to you one-on-one. And I feel like our voices have a chance. So this, I'm feeling better about this than any meeting I've been to since I moved.
Thank you. Paul.
Yeah.
Should we take one?
Well, can we finish around the room? So
sure.
we're gonna finish around the room. We have how many more? 2,
5,
3, 4,
5, 6, 7.
Well, let's, how many online do we have?
We have 2 with their hands up.
Can we do 2 online
Yep.
and then we'll come back around there? Okay.
Awesome.
Skinny, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
I actually didn't even know that my hand was up. And I'm out walking my dog right now, and I will say that I agree that it's nice to hear everybody's views, and I agree that our taxes are too high, and I'm concerned about development, and I share the views of many of the people that have spoken so far, and I really hope that the town is listening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Kitty.
you.
Yep.
Why don't we take the last one?
Yeah.
All right.
Eric, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
Hi, this is actually Caitlin Berry, his wife. Yeah, he's here too. But we just wanted to say that we both really appreciate this forum as well. I think a lot of the frustration in the past and still stems from feeling not listened to. I think that you hear a lot of people here tonight. Everyone I talk to in town, my neighbors, my friends, from what you hear from the survey, everyone seems to be, the overwhelming opinion is that we are sick of the growth. We don't want the apartments. We don't want it to be another Portland. It's been traditionally kind of a smaller town. And part of the reason we moved here is because of the natural resources, because of not only the beaches and the marshes, but just the trees that are around, the trails, the trees, every little thing like that really makes a big difference in the quality of life and where you live. And we've lived a lot of different places throughout the states, and there are so many towns that are just strip malls and endless, complexes. And we don't want Scarborough to be that way. And I think that what's really helpful, I too share with someone else said that this format is probably the first time I feel like someone is actually listening to our concerns. We've emailed before, and I've gotten some pretty consistent responses from Councilor Anderson, and we've tried to be involved in the community development process, because we're really concerned, just once that land is gone, it's gone. And I hear that, trying to address affordable housing, but it seems like there's a lot of criteria that's not being explained. What is affordable housing? A lot that's going up does not seem like affordable housing. It certainly wouldn't be for me. Did you have anything to add? So, I think things could be explained a little more clearly, like what does the council have control over? I mean, it seems like the developers are controlling everything that's going in. What does the council have control over? That's something I don't understand. I can't say that I fully understand some of the tax incentives that are being offered from the developers. My concern is just that there's only so much land, and also when we keep granting these exceptions, what precedent does that set for the future? What's to stop, from developers from seeking exemptions every time? And what's the criteria for public benefit? Because I'm seeing a lot of people not on board with what the supposed public benefit here. Public benefit, I think, is the green space, the trails, the quality of life here. I'm not seeing that public benefit shown. So, and I think this forum is really helpful. And just as a quick suggestion, and then I'll let other people speak, is I think it's been a lot of times I find out about these things like the day or two before, and somehow maybe if there could be a lot advance notice somehow, I don't know exactly what that way would be, but it seems like there's a lot of meetings that come up or special meetings that I don't find out about until right before. So just a thought, because I think this forum is really, really helpful and gives people a little more of an informal chance to speak. And I think a lot of people are intimidated to speak at some of these things, or I know it's hard to get out and everybody has things going on, but I think the fact of how many people showed up here tonight, and it's a testament to how many people care about what's going on, and the results of the survey as well. So thanks for hearing our concerns.
One plug, and I don't know if it would address all of Caitlin's comments and concerns about information getting out, but we have the town e-newsletter. So if you're not subscribed to that, that's something, if you go online, there's a place, I don't know exactly where it is. I don't know, Liam, if you know.
Stay connected.
Stay connected. Then you can actually type in your information and you'll get the town e-news that comes out twice a week. There's a lot in there. So again,
Twice a month.
Twice a month. You might miss some of these things because there's a lot of good information in there about what's happening in the town. I think we try our best to follow policy in terms of making the public know what's going on. Again, there's probably more we could take on at the communications committee to think, are there other things we can do to try and get information out more broadly or faster, though I think we are kind of doing the
We're
best we
trying to use
can.
all the tools we have, yeah.
Okay, going back to the room, did I skip over anybody?
Yeah, we had.
Okay.
I'll speak. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Von Stadi. That was my husband who was on the phone walking the dog.
I love that.
Glad he was listening in. I think, so I'm hearing a lot of people say pump the brakes, and I think that's why a lot of us are here, because we're concerned about the growth. And I think what I would like to see is just a more thorough, clearer impact analysis of how this growth will actually affect the town and how it can benefit us. Because even as you guys are talking about, what you love about Scarborough, I'm still not hearing a vision for how growth is going to benefit the things that you love and the things that we love. So I just think just a clearer vision and help us understand why this growth is good. I do appreciate what you're trying to do in terms of consolidating the growth and limiting it to certain areas and protecting green space, but adding more people still creates impact on all of those green spaces that we love. And also, thank you for doing this. This is great. Really appreciate it.
Alexander Mallon, Black Point Road. My husband and I moved here to Scarborough 3 years ago. We raised our children in Freeport. I've been coming to Scarborough all my life as my mother, grandmother, and great grandparents have. So without repeating, I agree with a lot that's been said. I watched Scarborough for the last 25 years from Freeport. And we watched the biggest high school at the time going into town. And now we're talking about more schools, although we're not talking about the bigger high school necessarily. But, and I just scratched my head, and my narrative has always been that the downside of Scarborough's history was garrisons, not a downtown epicenter like Yarmouth, Brunswick, which allowed, among other things, for sort of road development, is what I call it. A lot of missed opportunities in 30 years. So this is an opportunity to get it better. And I question why growth is so good for Scarborough and what actually is growth. We've sort of been vague. I mean, we've talked about numbers of rooms, bedrooms, whatever.
Yep.
We've talked about businesses, but it's still vague. So what she basically was saying. And why I'm in the health field. You should make what you have better. Because we don't know the impact, the ripple effect of more growth. We already know the impact of it, traffic,
higher taxes. And you know, it's gonna be a shame, some people can't live in this town, maybe. This is the growth of Southern Maine. So it's a bigger problem, so we need to not take on the burden necessarily for the entire Southern Maine region. But we need to do where we have better. And then this is a little bit of a separate thing, but I want to say that this is a big enough town now. Why can't we have representation by neighborhoods? So I live out at Black Point. And what about like a Higgins Beach, Black Point? That should be, because if everyone is from not from one sort of neighborhood where the council lives, that's challenging because everyone has different interests where they live.
Want
Do you want
to answer the?
So I was chair of the ad hoc charter committee that was recently assembled to look at our charter. And that topic came up and it was like heavily discussed amongst the members. It wasn't one in our purview to, I believe, do that. You need an elected charter commission in order to make that type of change within the charter. So but as a discussion point, did send it to the council and say, look, this got a lot of interest. I can tell you based on the debate that was had internally amongst the committee members, it was almost a 50-50 split between we like it the way it is versus maybe districts are good for us. The positive, like you said, a smaller pool to represent, you're a little closer with the representative when they go to sit on the council. That was a positive. But the other comment on the other side of that was, do we want all of our councilors to think about all of us, not just their little section of town? And I think there was a legitimate concern too of the possibility of certain areas of town banding together at maybe the detriment of another side of town. So, and you can see that divide clearly within the comprehensive plan, if I could spout off a little, where we just said all of our heavy developments could be right here on Route 1. Sorry, everyone that lives down there. I don't know if that's necessarily fair either. So,
Or how about taxation?
Right.
Relative to where you live.
Right. So, but anyways, it was an interesting debate amongst that committee. Unfortunately, without being an elected charter commission, there's little we could have done about it. We did recommend the council look at it further.
Can I interject something? Because I
That's
also
right.
sat on the charter review committee, and with the discussion, that was, Tom Hall got a legal opinion on that, and what came back, the legal opinion was we really couldn't make a recommendation to council I think the recommendation was to do it, part at large, like 4 at large and 3, 3 wards with the idea maybe the wards would be easily split up by school districts. But what came back was that we really that wasn't within our purview because you need a commission. Now, but I guess, my thinking on that, and I'm no lawyer, is that it's in the charter. It specifically says that there are 7 at-large councilors. So I don't know, I know what it was, that it was changing the form of government if we recommended that change. And I'm not sure, we're not changing the form of government to go to a mayor and selectmen. It was just swapping out how, councilors are elected. So if that's something that people are interested in, I would highly recommend paying attention to the charter review conversations to make your recommendations.
That's a great point. We are going through the process of reviewing the charter, and there will be recommendations likely on the November ballot, which everybody will vote on to make changes. So as we go through that process, as Allison said, take a look at the current charter. It's not very long, so it's a quick read, and if you have other feedback like that, bring it to the council, and we can go back to Tom and continue to ask questions to see what's in scope or out of scope. Is there your question? Yeah.
CD Armstrong, High Point Road. My bias is most of my career, most of my life, I've been involved in both conservation and in development. My career has been in the shelter industry. So I'm not against development, I'm not against growth. However, if you look around Southern Maine, it's very clear that some communities have done a really good job. downtown communities, and if not, look at Wells. That's now Virginia North. And I think Scarborough could be better job on that. It sounds like council has got this right in the crosshairs of trying to develop a better system. And I mean, the obvious one is more commercial development versus residential development. Taxes, concentrated development on Route 1 Turnpike corridor. Another one might be to think about whether there is a way to have developers contribute to an offset fund, so that when they're adding residential units, there are offsetting residential units taken off the potential for development. I know other communities, not so much in Maine, but most states do that regularly.
Great. Thank you. Art. Sorry, we're working this way.
Thank you for hosting this. This is great. A little confused with a lot of this. Art Dillon, I've been here for a long time. Our population, I think, had just turned 7,000. 7.3. Enjoyed growing up here, love the schools. Glad I was able to stay here. For the longest time, I've heard desire for the Downs to be a new downtown. I don't know if it was in our comprehensive plan or alluded to. I think it was. I remember going through Planapalooza. It was mentioned there. That was the town's goal. Well, lo and behold, we got a change of ownership, and developers are willing to work with the town to help make that happen. Kind of our partners as a town. So I was fortunate to sit on the downtown advisory committee, and that was our task, to help advise how to do that. I'm a big pro-business, commercial, and they're trying to make it a success. I mean, it's going to be a success for them, but however they do it. But it's their property, and they're looking for sure their best interest, but they're trying to promote the town and make this success for the town. I'm certainly not trying to speak on their behalf. And I get slowing down the growth of units and whatnot. So I get that side of it too. How do we make it work? I always, when we were doing Planapalooza, I always saw the Downs as a village, a new village, not necessarily a downtown. Scarborough has or had 7 villages, you know, growing up. And I just thought, oh, here's a great opportunity to plan a new village. Now, downtown, to me, that just rubs a little the wrong way, but it's exciting because it's a clean slate. So I'm definitely open to developing it, but doing it the right way. And if we have to take time and the developers have to do a little more single units, do it. But as everyone else was saying, if we're going to do something, let's do it right. Let's do it well. It's worth doing. It's worth doing right. I think that's about it.
Great. Art, thank you.
Denise Hamilton, 2 Rod Road, here in Scarborough. I've been in Scarborough 9 years. My husband was born and raised in Scarborough, lived most of his life here. And, you know, first, when attending meetings, I attended a lot of the marijuana ordinance meetings because we had a small grower next door to us. And it was similar to this, where the public could speak. But when the public goes to these planning board meetings and we're told you have 3 minutes to talk, I'm sorry, that's giving me the message of I'm not as important as the developers coming in, taking away our green space. or whatever else there is. I'm attending planning board meetings right now because of the development at Beech Ridge Motor Speedway. Attempted development. That is literally my backyard. Last thing I want is a 300,000 to 700,000 square foot warehouse in my backyard. When everybody on Two Rod Road or Kennebago Estates moved in, we're all very much aware of Beech Ridge Motor Speedway. My husband's grandfather built that track. And my husband has been involved in it since the day he was born. And we all moved there knowing that Beech Ridge was there. We did not move there knowing that there could be a 300,000 to 700,000 square foot warehouse sitting in our backyard. And when I go to planning board meetings, and I usually write something, which I've done at these meetings, and I'm told before I can even open my mouth, you have 3 minutes. Why? Because what I have to say isn't important. It's frustrating. We as community members, we pay taxes, just like you folks do. We have a right to say what we need to say in the time it's going to take for us to say it. And without being put on a timestamp. Whereas the developers can get up and they can rebut what something I said or the any of the planning board members. But if they lie, and we have caught people in that project have sent in lies, we can't get up and say, here's the proof they lied. So the town just needs to look at where they're developing, what's being developed, not just housing, commercial. You know, warehouse buildings don't belong on the Two Rod Road, Holmes Road, where it's primarily residential, regardless of what zoning is. There's things that I won't get into the politics of that. And I think the town in, doing something to preserve landmarks, obviously sometimes these landmarks, Scarborough Downs, Beech Ridge, have deteriorated. Why? Look at it, why? And what can the town do to preserve those landmarks in helping to preserve those landmarks rather than destroying them?
Thank you, Denise. Sir?
Shane Redding, I live on Burningfield Road, and to top off with what she's saying about Beech Ridge, that really don't need a warehouse of that magnitude on that spot, let alone the talk of a 900,000 square foot warehouse up on Burningfield Road, which is being talked about. The traffic impact of all of this between the Downs, Costco, the warehouse potentially at Beech Ridge, the warehouse up on Burningfield Road, which is part of Scarborough. There's 2 parts there, people are aware of that. That impact alone, 2 major warehouses, how's that going to affect the whole Payne Road intersection? That side of town is truly going to be affected by that massive planning and building on that side.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I'd like to put forth a suggestion that this committee and this town never, ever gives any tax breaks ever again to any developer. What about the cute girl at the bar? I kind of lost that. We have cute girl days, but in all seriousness, it makes 0 sense. These are hardworking folks, everyone here and everyone in town. Why are we giving away this stuff? It makes no sense. Perhaps by issuing a no tax at all, by nature, it'll slow down or dampen some slick talking folks coming in here and promising this for $30 million we gave these guys. I mean, nothing against Rock good business and all that stuff, but why did we give $30 million away? Is you're taking money out of our pockets and you're giving it to them to make money so they can suddenly, 3 years later, come up with more ideas to how to, oh, now in order to do this, we gotta do that. That whole village thing, that whole downtown thing, I think was a sales pitch for something we possibly didn't need anyway. It's, as a taxpayer, it's very, sure, say, can I hear an amen? I agree with that. It is absolutely, why are we doing it? And why should we? We are here, we should be here as a government to protect the people and the people's interest in this town. Okay? And we're clearly, everyone here has said, let's stop, let's slow down the growth. Perhaps to put a limit on it, I mean, Scarborough's town's borders are not changing. Perhaps in our surveys or whatever, we could also consider this like last night rent. Look, let's do a 50-year plan and let's figure out, okay, how many permits are we gonna give out in 50 years? What do we see as a town now that in 2040, 2050, well, my math is wrong on that. Where do we wanna be in terms of population density, roads, and that kind of stuff. And if we all agree to the final goal, like, hey, in 2050, we've got how many, 22,000 people in town now?
Yeah.
Something like that. Maybe we shoot to like, let's shoot for 30 by, or whatever, X, by 2050. And maybe we can, that way it's all kind of, it's already in a kind of a box for a limited thing. So people can complain about the growth, but if we all know at the very end, it's like, hey, it's only to get to 30,000. And finally, I want to thank you all. I think our interest is by it sounds like we're all, from here and live here and love this place. And I think our motivations are all dovetailed, and I'm very excited about that. Thank you for being here.
No?
Yeah, thank you.
Can I make a point on your point?
Yes, sir.
We didn't give it away. We're making the payments. Right, good point.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Yeah.
we're leaving.
Yeah.
No, start talking quickly.
It's 75 million, sorry, $75 million.
No?
Yeah, so I'm Noah Nygren, 16 Phillips Street. Been a resident here since I was born in 1995, and I'll be honest, I got enough questions to derail an Amtrak here. So what I'll do is I'll just I'll see what I can get away with. As far as you mentioned the legislation, but aren't they also trying to kill the GMO and eliminate single-family zoning?
That got taken out of, eliminating the GMO got taken out.
Okay.
I think they're not eliminating single family zoning, but they are allowing for up to 3 units in any single family lot. So
kind of worse.
Yeah. Right, did I get that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Mine too.
That's our understanding of it. Again, this is stuff that's fine.
And is it, that's not about tiny houses, it's like, a main house and accessory buildings, it could all be.
One of the 3 could be an ADU,
Okay.
which could be a tiny house.
Okay. Next is about Downs downtown versus Scarborough downtown. I'm seeing models and they're referencing Commercial Street in Portland. So this is like downtown, parallel parking, walk around. The type of thing that I do not want to drive into. And so if I want to go to dinner in Scarborough Downs, right? I want it to be like Gallery Boulevard. I want to drive to, say, Texas Roadhouse and park in a parking lot where it is not a disaster to scrap and battle for parallel parking the way Portland residents do. And so what's going to happen here is I don't live in Scarborough Downs. I live on Sawyer Road. I live right there. So I'm not going to drive to Scarborough Downs to go to dinner if it is a disaster to go. And so what I'm thinking here is this is on a fast track to turn into a Downs downtown, which is like what they're pretending it's not going to do, even though they're saying they want it to be parallel parking, this, that, the other thing, with renders of a commercial street in Portland. And so how is this not going to turn into a Downs downtown if I get sick and tired of it as soon as I'm there? Parking wise and all the other Portland stuff that we don't like.
Can I just add something to that?
Yeah.
For people that Google it, look up the Birkdale in Huntersville, North Carolina. This is what the Downs downtown sounds like it's going to be. I lived in North Carolina for a few years, and it's Burkdale Village. I think it's called Burkdale Village, but it's in Huntersville, North Carolina. And you've got shops, you've got condos, you've got apartments, you've got single-family homes, parallel parking. It's a nightmare. And that's what this sounds like it's gonna be.
Yeah, and so basically where I want this to go is, I think Dan Bacon has said he doesn't want it to be like the Thompson Fair Mall. I don't care. I do. I don't care what he wants. And I want it to be like Gallery Boulevard, where you kind of drive in, you park your car, say at Lowe's or Texas Roadhouse, where it is convenient and you have a spot, and that's the way it should be. I do not want, well, I've already said what I don't want. Next item is the TMP. So they keep on saying this wonderful TMP is a benefit to the public. Because they're saying, oh, well, in the survey, everyone is so butthurt about traffic, which everybody seems to be. And they're like, oh, well, we'll fix that with our wonderful TMP. Failing to mention that it comes with 2,000 to 3,000 residents and they can't widen any roads, which is how you add capacity. They're trying to play around with intersections that they're going to splice in and replace. Meanwhile, the way that you would add capacity is, say, at Payne Road, for example. This is a great example. Payne Road is a 2-lane road between Beacon Apartments and Shaw's, okay? Nobody likes that it chokes down from a 5-lane intersection at Shaw's to a 2-lane road, which is a disaster of an alternate merge. And then it's all that is just so that it can open back up to 5 lanes at Beacon. Why would they not instead say, wait a minute, a benefit to the public is to widen this road. It's got to be 5 lanes from Shaw's to Beacon. And oh, by the way, they're going to do a Muzzy Road signalized intersection. And they're probably going to spudge in just a intersection where it's 2 lanes. So they're building it wrong the first time, when instead you could just build the 5-lane road, which the town could fund that. I mean, as necessary, or we could say, okay, we'll just do the signalized intersection at Muzzy when it is 5 lanes wide. Because now what they're doing is they're going to do the 2 alternate merges. They're just going to like rebuild them and claim that makes half a difference, which it doesn't. The problem is that we don't want to do the alternate merge in the first place. And so they're going to do that. We're going to squeeze down to 2 lanes, and then there's going to be a signalized intersection at Muzzy. We have to stop when that light turns red. And so traffic is going to back up like that if it gets timed wrong, because parents have to come flooding out of 8 corners. And so that light has to stay red for a while if that's going to clear out the intersection.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just one example.
On the TMP,
yes,
I think it's not gonna reduce traffic or make things better, because it's really designed as the absorption requirement by the state that the Downs needs to address in order to allow for the growth that's going to be coming out of there. So I wouldn't say, I don't think people should be thinking of the TMP as a traffic solver. It's really there to absorb. But to your point, there might be some questionable design choices that might actually make traffic worse potentially, depending on everything that surrounds it.
So what I'm saying, and thank you, and so why are we allowing them to still say, oh, well, this survey results yielded some feedback that we don't like the traffic? Let's have our Portland guy call in and say, oh yeah, this survey indicates that we want the TMP, or that this Downs project is a benefit to the public. What on earth is that? By the way, don't we fund like 1/3 of the TMP ourselves? So they're not even really funding the whole thing. So I don't know. I have a whole list of benefit to the public issues that I can't say in 3 minutes. Like you were saying, they got like a half hour to advertise their packet. And I have like 3. I'm not going to have like that long to go, try to argue it when I do my public comment. I mean, I could email it to you, but
It's not a public record.
Oh, okay. So anyway, that's just one of my benefit to the public questions with the TMP, because I've heard Mr. Hall say, oh, well, traffic is solved, TMP. And I like Tom Hall, I do. but he agreed with them. What? So again, I think they're getting away with planting the seed in folks' heads that this traffic is a non-issue. That could not be farther from the truth.
Well, I will add though, there are a lot of projects in the TMP that town staff spent a lot of time. It took almost over a year, I think, for the town staff to work with the Downs and the state to identify those projects that needed to get fixed. If for some reason the Downs isn't allowed to grow at the projections that they put in the TMP, which may or may not have included some of this growth related to the downtown, they could go back to the state, I think, reapply, and then those fixes, which are fixes we need as a community, they could likely try and backtrack from those and get approval from the state. So there is a little bit of they are having to do things that do benefit us. Maybe it's not, up to, I think somebody made the statement earlier about like, how do we objectively assess public benefit, and it might not be sufficient. But I would say if, they do have the opportunity to go back to the state, reapply and ask for something different if they feel like the growth that they originally projected isn't going to be as high. So I think that's just important for the public to understand too.
Admittedly, the TMP is, I've been on the council 6 months, and so TMP is not an area of my strong suit right now. And so I will just acknowledge that that's something that I need to better understand too. But I can confirm what John is saying is that if they don't grow the way that they projected, that they will absolutely likely ask for a reduction of their obligation to the TMP. That's probably going to happen.
Would that also reduce the tax break that they would get? I mean, are there thresholds that they have to meet in order to qualify for that 40%?
Right now.
There are, and they're
doing a great job on that.
exceeding.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So I don't think it's a risk.
That's not a good argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we go back to online?
Andrew, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
Good evening. I am Andrew Mackey. I'm the Executive Director of the Scarborough Land Trust. And I just wanted to thank you for having this forum and letting everyone give their thoughts and impressions. And I just wanted to let everyone know that we're also listening. This is very valuable to us in terms of our planning. The Scarborough Land Trust is a very close partner with the town of Scarborough. We have a great relationship. And we do some of the things I think that everyone's talking about that benefit all the residents of Scarborough. Currently, we have 5 active projects right now, about $1.4 million. We're hoping to get about 40% of that from the town land bond, and there's a very rigorous process that we go through, and each project is evaluated. But that's only 40%. That means that we have to find the other 60%. And we find that wherever we can and ask anyone we can to support us. But, we talked about tax breaks and kind of the rate of development. Yes, there should be development. There should be managed development. We totally agree with that. But it's an unequal playing field when you're talking about a $75 million tax break. And here we're talking about $1.4 million for 5 projects. So I think we have to think about how we're going to support protecting these natural and agricultural areas that we all need, that not only have very low cost to the town in terms of services. I won't say zero, but sometimes pretty close to zero. They actually are in the plus column in terms of filtering water, filtering air, providing healthy soil. The list goes on in terms of what these natural services provide to the community. So just a couple quick points. One, we are making an offer this week for the hiring of a conservation director. It's a new position for us. and that person will work full-time on projects. So we have the capacity to do more. We're looking to do more. We're trying to increase our activity because of the changes happening in Scarborough. Some of the things that came up, if you're in a position, you don't like what you see, and you have the ability, donate real estate. You can donate real estate to us. If it's not conservation land, that's okay. We can sell real estate and buy suitable conservation land. Also, the idea, I think, of a fee on development or a real estate transfer tax. There are many examples of those partnerships between local municipalities and land trusts using those dollars. You get us those dollars, we'll use them. We'll provide the natural areas for people to enjoy forever. So I just wanted to really kind of stress some of those as public benefit, and we're working every day to try to do more.
Right.
Andrew, that's,
Thank
you
you,
know,
Andrew.
there has been a lot of people who at least have contacted me or questions I've gotten around kind of what you just described about real estate transfer tax and like how we can potentially look at our ordinances and zoning to help better preserve more green space. So I think that's a great idea for us to explore further, at least to have that conversation. I don't know if that would be through the Conservation Commission. That might be a good place to have that dialogue, but Councillor Scyther sits on the Conservation Commission. So that would be a good place to continue that conversation because I think it's worth exploring at least. All right, any other questions online or in the room before we close?
Nick?
No? You want to?
Go for it.
Yeah, first, thank you. I think everyone appreciates this opportunity because it's so much more formal in a town council meeting setting. And we also understand that you have business other than this one topic going on. So having a forum like this, it's a wonderful idea and I hope it continues. And we appreciate you being so open and honest about some of the thoughts and deliberations that you go through. I think, for me, I want to take this opportunity to not tell you how to do your job, but I really hope that at the end of the day, the number one thing you sit up there and you debate an issue, I hope you're asking yourself, how does this impact the quality of life for the people here, right? And you might get blown off track and you get into the weeds and we're stuck at TMP permits. And I know what these are because I was on the planning board for 8 years. I was there when the Downs first brought that master plan to us. And it was, okay, 1,800 homes, but the plan was for 20 to 30 years. That's not what this is anymore. And if you ask me, can we absorb 100 houses a year over a 30-year period? The answer was, okay, that's reasonable. But what we see now is not reasonable and it's not sustainable. So I think we have to ask, I just hope that the counselors take the time to go back to that one point. What's it mean for the quality of life for the people here? Okay, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's the new school, whether it's land conservation, how does this impact us? And that you always go back to that. And if it's a positive, then it should be done. And sometimes it's easy to say, yes, go do it. It can be challenging. There could be a lot of steps to it. But I just want you to go back to that one point. As far as getting into some of those technical aspects of it, I just hope that you're also considering any precedent setting. I know it was mentioned tonight, but if you do set a precedent, grant the exemption, are you setting yourself up for not just this developer down the road to come to you, but another developer saying, why are my apartments not as important as his apartments? And you granted them the exception. Are you about to get us into a legal battle down the road? So I appreciate the fact that you've talked to, I think you said a consultant about the public benefit aspect. Seems like you're trying to cover your tracks there, set a threshold. I appreciate that effort, but I think you really need to be conscious of what could happen going forward if you say yes. The other point about that is when you get into the GMO, this is the first year of the new GMO. We don't even know how it's working because I can tell you why. Hasn't been enough time. So we're already asking to do a workaround of something that hasn't even been implemented for a full year. So you don't have great data to work up as to whether or not this is producing results as you expected. And it's okay to go back later on and say, this isn't producing the results we expected, either good or bad, and then try to readjust from there. So that would be my other comment on the big push right now to modify something that is relatively new. And like I said, I know it's getting late and long, but one last thing, that there is, I get the need for diversity in stock and housing units, and it's just always bothered me though, we fear the family unit. And that's what I keep hearing. It's like, oh, the schools are gonna get pounded by this. Okay, if you ask me whether I am in favor of supporting a stronger school system because we have great families and great neighborhoods versus I've got asphalt going everywhere because I need more traffic lights and I need to move traffic through this town because we need more apartments. I'm okay putting my money into a school than more asphalt. And that's just the way I feel about that. And so, again, it goes back to what's our quality of life? What are your decisions doing to impact that? So, and please don't try to solve regional or statewide housing issues. I can tell you right now, there's a lot of policies going on our borders that are really impacting what we think are our needs. They aren't our needs. These are needs of people who are coming here. And why we feel that we need to service them all is, I don't understand it. Again, what's it do to our quality of life? We are here and we are asking you to pump the brakes, to take your time, think about the impacts and the long-term ramifications of your decisions. So that's my spiel for tonight. Thank you.
If anyone would like to sign Nick McGee's nomination.
Councilor Schleifer,
I like it.
let's let Noah get this thing, and you wanna say anything before we close?
So I'd like to just kind of add to
Pretty much
that.
spot.
I've previously said in a public comment, growth is a tax. The town takes away some of my quality of life, gives it away to the new resident who is now competing with me for space, infrastructure, and resources. And then the town benefits because there's another building in town which yields property tax. Growth is a tax. That is why it is flying like a lead balloon. Everyone's not taking it very well. It's not flying. And so it's because in order to take on, like you said, a bunch of population too fast, well, we can't absorb that. And so now it impacts our quality of life. So anyway, I wanted to kind of reiterate, growth is a tax. There is no financial, this is the only thing that matters going on. We're getting it some way in US dollars or quality of life. It's getting taken away from us somehow, and this is how it's happening. Thank you.
So when is the next one?
We actually are gonna, on Monday, the communications committee is gonna meet and debrief on this. And if there are
He
any,
called it a post-mortem in the email to me, and I was like, oh, no.
So,
What's about to happen?
again, if you have feedback after today, again, of how to make these better, this was our first attempt at doing it. We're gonna be doing these likely for budget, kind of like a similar type of form perhaps. And so if you guys have feedback, I would think the next type we'll have an open community forum will be around the budget likely.
So it's gonna be a finance one?
Yes, maybe not immediately, but doing one on process and how the public is engaged. You know me, I speak up about everything. And, we were talking about the planning board, and it's interesting, I'll just use the planning board as an example since that came up. There's no opportunity for public comment at planning board. Everything is asterisk that the public is allowed to comment on this agenda item, this agenda item, this agenda item. And as far as what's valued and what's not valued, when they were just starting, and I'm not saying this to slam the planning board. Everybody works so hard at what they do and what their responsibilities are. But when the meetings were opening back up for the public, I mean, on the agenda, it suggested or asked the public to participate remotely because there's only room for 50 people in the room. And that's saying the developers are more important than the public. So I think that people want to be heard. I mean, I talk a lot at meetings, and I'm thrilled to see so many people here and willing to express a point of view. It's really refreshing. So process, I think, Public process, I think, is an
Yeah,
important.
that's a great-
I think that's a great one.
Yeah.
And we're definitely open to other suggestions, and this is community driven. But we are offering our time and, our candor to talk about what you guys want to talk about. We have an agenda every 2 weeks to talk about things we need to talk about. So this is really for the residents.
So we'll just know when we look at the town newsletter we'll know.
Yep.
Absolutely.
They're expecting monthly, is that what they?
We were originally thinking quarterly, but again, like, I think we'll likely have something budget related and in
In the
April.
next 6 weeks, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
But, I think we'll just have to figure out what's the right cadence and
Yeah.
then, again, maybe there's something we could do. Again, just to think about like how to make it work with scheduling, like if we're meeting for town council meetings. Maybe we reserve 2 hours before to start it, because they typically start at 7. We could always try and do something before that allows for more public involvement with the counselors prior to the actual meeting. That way it's like less intimidating. Because again, I think it's tough when we're trying to do business, even for the planning board, like those agendas are usually pretty stacked.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so I know people want to like go through, get it done, but it shouldn't be at the detriment of people feeling like they're not being heard. And so I'm sure there's probably some creative solutions we could think through. And, even within our own policies for the different meetings we have, which we control as a council, we could look at potentially requiring some sort of
Public engagement.
public engagement activity that needs to be part of their agenda or planning to make sure that gives everybody the opportunity to be heard appropriately.
And I would think that it would help you all to know that there are people in the town. I mean, many times you go to some of these meetings and nobody's there.
Yeah.
So the participation is really, I think, wonderful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That will get everybody kind of.
Yeah.
together.
So thank you, everyone,
Thank
again,
you.
for online and for coming. We appreciate